My father's hands hit my shoulders, glass exploded around me, blood ran down my face as I smiled. For 32 years, I'd been the family's invisible ATM, paying their mortgages, their cars, their perfect lifestyle, while they called me worthless and nothing. But as I picked glass from my skin, I realized something. They'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives, because everything they owned, every dollar they spent, it all came from accounts with my name on them. That night, I took back what was mine. By morning, their empire had completely fallen apart. Looking back, I should have seen the signs earlier. But when you're raised in what looks like the perfect American family, it's hard to recognize the cracks beneath the surface. The Martinez family had it all, or so everyone thought. Our $2.5 million home in Westchester sat on 3 acres of perfectly manicured lawn. Dad's BMW and Mom's Mercedes gleamed in the circular driveway. Family photos from our European vacations lined the marble-topped console in the foyer. I was Jennifer Martinez, the success story. At 32, I'd built my marketing agency from nothing into a company pulling in $400,000 a year. Forbes had featured me in their 30 Under 30 list 3 years running. My parents loved introducing me at their country club events. "This is our Jennifer," Mom would beam, her manicured hand resting possessively on my shoulder. "CEO of her own company. We're so proud." But pride, I learned, has a price tag. The dinner conversations always felt choreographed. Dad would discuss his investments with the confidence of a man who'd never seen a portfolio statement. Mom would mention their latest charity gala, the one where they'd donated $10,000 to some cause they'd forget by next month. And I'd sit there, cutting my overpriced steak, knowing exactly where that donation money had come from. "Oh, Jennifer, honey," Mom said one evening over dinner, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant she wanted something. "Your father and I have been talking about expanding the business." Dad nodded gravely, as if running a small consulting firm made him Warren Buffett. "Big opportunities coming up, but we need some capital to really make it happen." I'd heard this speech before. The family business that somehow never turned a profit but always needed more investment. "How much this time?" "Well," Dad cleared his throat, "we were thinking maybe 50,000, just to get us over this hump." 50,000, like it was pocket change, like I hadn't already fronted them the down payment on this house, like the monthly transfers to their accounts weren't already bleeding my business dry. But they were family, and family takes care of each other, right? That's what I told myself as I wrote another check. What I told myself when Dad's business expenses included a new Rolex. What I told myself when Mom's networking events somehow required a $5,000 dress budget every month. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. I'd arrived at Dad's office to drop off some financial documents. Ironically, papers proving my income so he could secure another business loan. His door was closed, but I could hear voices inside. "She doesn't need to know the details," Dad was saying. "Jennifer makes more money than she knows what to do with. She won't even miss it." "But what if she asks questions?" That was Mom's voice, worried. "She won't. She's too grateful to be part of this family to cause problems. Besides, what's she going to do? Cut us off? She needs us more than we need her." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand still raised to knock. The papers in my other hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The girl's been desperate for our approval since she was 5 years old," Dad continued. "As long as we throw her some crumbs of affection, she'll keep paying for our lifestyle. It's actually brilliant when you think about it." Mom's laugh was sharp, cruel. "I almost feel bad for her sometimes. She works so hard to make us proud, and she has no idea we just see her as a walking ATM." The papers slipped from my fingers, scattered across the marble floor. I dropped to my knees, scrambling to collect them before anyone noticed. But the damage was done. 27 years of unconditional love, shattered in 30 seconds of overheard conversation. When Dad's door opened 5 minutes later, I was sitting calmly in the waiting area, papers neatly stacked in my lap. "Jennifer, what a wonderful surprise." His smile was warm, practiced. "I wasn't expecting you today." Just dropping off those income statements you needed, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging in my chest. He took the papers, glanced through them with satisfaction. Perfect. This should seal the deal with the bank. You're such a good daughter, always looking out for your old man. I smiled back. Of course, Dad. Family always comes first. But something had shifted inside me. The rose-colored glasses were cracking, and I was starting to see my family's behavior with painful clarity. The requests became more frequent, more demanding. 100,000 for a sure-thing investment opportunity, 50,000 to cover some unexpected business expenses, 25,000 because Mom had fallen in love with a piece of art at a gallery opening. And every time I hesitated, every time I asked for details or suggested they might need to budget more carefully, the temperature in the room would drop. I'm disappointed in you, Jennifer, Mom would say, her voice cold enough to freeze blood. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Dad's approach was more direct. You think you're too good for this family now? Think your money makes you better than us? Then came the isolation tactics, family gatherings where I wasn't invited, important decisions made without consulting me, casual mentions of how my brother David was so much more generous with his money, even though David worked as a middle school teacher and barely made $40,000 a year. David understands what family means, Dad would say, loud enough for me to hear. He doesn't question us when we need help. He trusts us. The gaslighting was subtle but constant. When I'd mention feeling taken advantage of, Mom would look genuinely confused. Taken advantage of? Honey, we're your parents. Everything we do is for your own good. When I'd point out that their lifestyle seemed awfully expensive for people running a struggling business, Dad would get that disappointed look in his eyes. I thought we raised you better than this. Since when did you become so suspicious and cold? They were experts at making me feel guilty for having boundaries. Every request came wrapped in emotional manipulation. Every refusal was met with wounded looks and passive-aggressive comments that lasted for weeks. My health started suffering. I was losing weight, losing sleep, snapping at my employees over minor mistakes. My assistant, Sarah, finally pulled me aside after I'd spent an entire morning crying in my office. Jen, what's going on? You're not yourself lately. I wanted to tell her. Wanted to explain that I was slowly being emotionally and financially bled dry by the people who were supposed to love me most. But how do you say that out loud? How do you admit that your perfect family is a lie? Just family stuff, I said instead. Nothing I can't handle. But I wasn't handling it. I was drowning. The final straw came on a Thursday in September. Dad had called an emergency family meeting, without me. I only found out about it when I stopped by the house to drop off some documents and saw David's car in the driveway. I let myself in through the back door, planning to say hello and leave. But voices from the living room stopped me. The problem is Jennifer's attitude, Dad was saying. She's getting too comfortable questioning our decisions. She's becoming selfish, Mom added. All that money has gone to her head. She thinks she can control us. David's voice was uncomfortable. I don't know, Dad. Maybe she has a point about some of this stuff. I mean, the amounts you're asking for are pretty big. Don't you start too, Dad snapped. We raised you both better than this. Jennifer is making more money than she knows what to do with. She can afford to help her family. But what happens when she gets married? David asked. What happens when she has kids and priorities change? There was a long pause. Then Mom spoke, her voice low and calculating. Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we need to make sure she understands her place in this family. She exists to support us. That's what children do for their parents. And if she doesn't want to? David pressed. Dad's laugh was cold. Then she's not really family, is she? She's just some ungrateful girl who forgot where she came from. I stood in the kitchen, my hand pressed against the wall for support. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't even a person to them. I was a resource to be managed, a problem to be solved. But the worst part? The part that made my stomach twist with nausea? David didn't argue. My brother, the one person I thought might understand, just sat there in silence while our parents reduced me to a bank account with legs. I left through the back door, drove to my office, and sat in my car in the parking garage for 2 hours. When Sarah found me there at 9 p.m., my face was streaked with tears and my hands were shaking. "That's it," she said, taking one look at me. "I'm calling Dr. Martinez." "No," I said quickly. "No doctors. I'm fine." "Jen, you're having a panic attack in a parking garage. You're not fine." She was right. Nothing about this was fine. But I couldn't admit that yet. Couldn't admit that the family I'd spent 32 years trying to please had never loved me at all. The next few months passed in a haze of obligation and resentment. Every family dinner felt like a performance. Every request for money felt like extortion. But I kept paying, kept smiling, kept pretending everything was normal. Because what was the alternative? Cut them off? Lose the only family I'd ever known? I was trapped, and they knew it. They'd built their entire lifestyle around my inability to say no, around my desperate need for their approval, around the little girl inside me who still believed that if she was just good enough, generous enough, successful enough, they might finally love her for real. But that little girl was about to learn a very hard lesson about the difference between love and control, about the price of being the family's golden goose, about what happens when you finally realize that some people will only love you for what you can give them. The breaking point came on a Monday morning in November. I'd just closed the biggest deal of my career, a $2 million contract with a Fortune 500 company. I was flying high, proud of what I'd accomplished, excited to share the news with my family. I called Dad first. "Guess what?" I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. "I just landed the Morrison account. $2 million. There was a pause. Then, "That's great, sweetheart. Really great. Listen, your mother and I were just talking, and we have an opportunity that could be perfect timing." My heart sank. Not congratulations, not pride, just an opportunity to take my money. "What kind of opportunity?" I asked, though I already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "Well, there's this property coming up for auction, prime real estate, perfect for development. But we need to move fast, and we need capital." "How much capital?" $200,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but Jennifer, this could set us up for life. Your mother and I could finally retire comfortably. $200,000. Within 10 minutes of me sharing my biggest professional achievement, they wanted to take 10% of it. "Dad, I just told you about the biggest success of my career, and the first thing you want to talk about is money." His voice went cold. "Success? Jennifer, you wouldn't have any success without the foundation your mother and I gave you, the values we instilled, the support we provided. This is your chance to give back." "Give back?" "Dad, I've given you over $2 million in the last 10 years. How much more do I need to give back?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When he spoke again, his voice was pure ice. "I think you need to remember who you're talking to, young lady, and I think you need to decide what kind of daughter you want to be." He hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Mom. "Jennifer, honey, your father told me about your conversation. I'm very disappointed." "Mom, No, let me finish. Your father and I have sacrificed everything for you and David. We put you through college, supported your dreams, celebrated your successes, and now, when we need help, you're acting like we're strangers asking for a handout." The guilt hit like a physical blow. This was their specialty, taking any attempt at boundaries and turning it into evidence of my selfishness. "It's not that I don't want to help," I said weakly. "Then prove it. Come to dinner tonight. We'll discuss this like a family." That dinner was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. They'd invited David and his wife, creating an audience for my humiliation. The conversation was orchestrated perfectly. Casual mentions of their financial stress, subtle digs at my lifestyle, worried looks exchanged over my changing attitude. "I just don't understand what's happened to you," Mom said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "You used to be such a generous girl, so loving." David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His wife, Lisa, studied her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. "I am generous," I protested. I've been generous for years, but I'm starting to feel like an ATM instead of a daughter. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dad's face went red. An ATM? Is that what you think of your family? As people who just want your money? I think, because let me tell you something, Jennifer. Money doesn't make you family. Love makes you family. Loyalty makes you family. And right now, I'm not seeing much of either from you. The attack was swift and brutal. Within minutes, they'd painted me as ungrateful, selfish, and cold. David tried to change the subject twice, but they weren't done with me yet. Maybe, Mom said slowly. You need some time to think about what really matters to you, whether it's money or family. It was an ultimatum disguised as concern. Pay up or get out. I looked around the table, at the chandelier I'd bought them for their anniversary, the artwork I'd helped them purchase, the designer furniture that came from my bank account. I looked at my brother, who couldn't meet my eyes, at my sister-in-law, who was probably calculating how much of David's teacher salary they'd want next. And for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. Not as the loving family I desperately wanted them to be, but as they really were. Users, manipulators, people who'd built their entire identity around spending someone else's money and calling it love. You're right, I said quietly. I do need to think about what really matters. I stood up from the table, my legs shaky but my voice steady. Thanks for dinner. I'll be in touch. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember getting to my apartment, don't remember walking through the door, but I remember sitting on my couch at midnight, staring at my bank statements, adding up the numbers. $2.8 million. In 10 years, I'd given them $2.8 million. Money that could have bought me my own house, funded my own retirement, secured my own future. Money they'd taken while calling me selfish. I pulled out my laptop and started going through every transaction, every loan, every gift I'd given them. What I found made my blood run cold. They hadn't just been taking my money, they'd been using it as collateral. The house, the cars, Dad's business loans. Everything was tied to my accounts as a guarantor. If their investments went bad, if their business failed, I'd be liable for all of it. They hadn't just been using me as an ATM. They'd been using me as insurance, making sure that no matter what happened, I'd be the one left holding the bill. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. We need to talk, tomorrow at my office. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, okay, see you at 2 p.m. But this time, I wasn't going as their obedient daughter. I was going as someone who finally understood the game they'd been playing, and I was done being the only one who didn't know the rules. I walked into Dad's office at exactly 2 p.m., my leather portfolio tucked under my arm. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, the one I'd helped him buy 3 years ago, looking every inch the successful businessman. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jennifer, sit down. We need to clear the air about last night. I took the chair across from him, the same chair where I'd signed loan guarantees, co-signed business documents, and written countless checks. Today, it felt different. Today, I wasn't the desperate daughter seeking approval. I've been thinking about what you said, I began carefully, about family loyalty and what really matters. His face relaxed slightly. Good. I'm glad you're seeing reason. I am seeing reason. That's exactly the problem. The change in his expression was immediate. The warm, paternal mask slipped, revealing something colder underneath. What's that supposed to mean? I opened my portfolio and pulled out a thick stack of papers. Bank statements, loan documents, wire transfer receipts. 10 years of financial history laid out in black and white. It means I spent all night going through my records. Do you want to know what I found? He glanced at the papers, then back at me. Jennifer, I don't like your tone. $2.8 million, Dad. That's what I've given you and Mom over the past decade. Not including the house down payment, not including the cars, not including the countless dinners and vacations and shopping trips. We never asked you to keep track, but I did keep track, because I'm a businesswoman and businesswomen document everything. I pulled out another sheet. This is particularly interesting. My name as guarantor on your business loans, your mortgage refinancing, even Mom's credit cards. Did you think I'd never notice? The color was draining from his face. Those are just formalities. Formalities? Dad, if your business fails, I'm liable for $800,000 in debt. If you default on the house, the bank comes after me. You didn't just take my money, you made me responsible for your entire financial existence. He stood up abruptly, his chair rolling back and hitting the wall. How dare you come into my office and accuse me of… Of what? Using me? Because that's exactly what you did. I stood too, matching his energy. I heard you talking to Mom, Dad, that day in March. I heard you call me a walking ATM. I heard you laugh about how desperate I was for your approval. For a moment, his face went completely blank. Then something shifted, and the mask came off entirely. So, what if I did? You think you're some kind of victim here? You think we owe you something? His voice was rising, all pretense of fatherly love gone. Let me tell you what you are, Jennifer. You're nothing. You're a spoiled brat who got lucky in business and thinks that makes you special. The words hit like physical blows, but I'd been preparing for this moment all night. Keep going, Dad. Tell me what you really think. You want to know what I really think? I think you're pathetic. 32 years old and still desperate for Mommy and Daddy's approval. So desperate you'll write check after check, just hoping we'll finally love you the way you want. Each word was designed to wound, to send me running back to my old patterns of guilt and compliance. But something had broken in me last night. The part that needed their love had finally died. You're right, I said calmly. I was pathetic. I was desperate. But you know what's really pathetic, Dad? Two grown adults who built their entire lifestyle around manipulating their daughter's trauma. His face went red. Don't you dare… What? Don't I dare tell the truth? That you and Mom are nothing but well-dressed parasites? That everything you own, everything you are, exists because I was too broken to see what you were doing? He moved around the desk toward me, his hands clenched into fists. You ungrateful little… Go ahead, I said, not backing down. Hit me. Show me who you really are. For a second, I thought he might actually do it. His face was twisted with rage, his whole body vibrating with fury. Then he seemed to remember where we were, that his office had glass walls and his secretary could see everything. Get out, he said through gritted teeth. Get out of my office. Gladly. But first, I have something for you. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a certified letter. This is notice that I'm calling in all outstanding loans. You have 30 days to repay the $2.8 million you owe me, plus interest. His mouth fell open. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. I'm also removing myself as guarantor from all your accounts. Your bank will be notified today. Jennifer, you can't do this. This will destroy us. For the first time in the conversation, his voice cracked, not with anger, but with fear. You should have thought about that before you decided I was nothing. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Dad, don't bother calling Mom to strategize. I'm going to see her next. The drive to my parents' house felt surreal. I'd made this trip thousands of times, but today the familiar streets looked different, the perfectly manicured lawns, the expensive cars, the whole affluent facade. It all looked hollow now. Mom was in the garden when I arrived, tending to roses I'd bought her for Mother's Day. She looked up with a bright smile that faltered when she saw my expression. Jennifer, what a lovely surprise. I was just thinking about you. Were you thinking about how much money you could squeeze out of me today? The gardening shears slipped from her hands. Excuse me? I just came from Dad's office. We had a very enlightening conversation about what I really mean to this family. She straightened up, brushing dirt from her designer jeans. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Mom. I heard you, that day in March. I heard you call me a walking ATM. I heard you laugh about how desperate I am for your approval. Her face went through a series of expressions, surprise, guilt, calculation, then finally settling on cold anger. You were eavesdropping? On a private conversation between your father and me? Private conversation? You were planning how to manipulate me, how to keep me trapped so you could keep spending my money. That's not… We never. She was fumbling for words, trying to find the right combination to make me back down. Save it, Mom. I've had 12 hours to process what you really think of me, what you've always thought of me. She abandoned the garden and walked toward the house. I followed her into the kitchen with the granite countertops I'd paid for, the stainless steel appliances that came from my credit card, the breakfast nook where I'd eaten countless meals while listening to them complain about money. "Sit down," she said, her voice taking on that maternal tone she used when she wanted to manage me. "Let's talk about this like adults." I am talking like an adult, for the first time in my life. She poured herself a glass of wine, expensive wine, naturally, and turned to face me. "Jennifer, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. This isn't like you." "You're right. The old Jennifer would have apologized by now, would have written you a check to make this all go away, but the old Jennifer was an idiot." "Don't talk about yourself that way." "Why not? You do. You and Dad sit around calling me pathetic and desperate while you spend my money. At least I'm honest about it." She took a sip of wine, studying me over the rim of the glass. "What do you want, Jennifer?" "I want my money back, all of it. I want you and Dad to get jobs and support yourselves like normal adults. I want you to stop pretending you love me when all you love is my bank account." "That's ridiculous." "Of course we love you." "Really? Name one thing you love about me that isn't related to money." The silence stretched between us. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Opened it again. "You're being unfair," she said finally. "Am I? Because I've been thinking about this all night, Mom, trying to remember the last time you called just to see how I was doing, the last time you asked about my life without following it up with a request for money, the last time you seemed proud of me for something other than my income." More silence. "You can't, can you? Because everything between us has been transactional for years. I perform, I pay, and you pretend to love me for it." She set down her wine glass harder than necessary. "You're being dramatic. Families help each other. That's what families do." "Help each other? Mom, when have you ever helped me? When I was working 80-hour weeks to build my business, were you there? When I was stressed and exhausted and barely sleeping, did you offer support? Or did you just see an opportunity to ask for more money?" "We've always been supportive." "Supportive? You've been predatory. You and Dad saw a damaged kid who would do anything for approval, and you turned that into a business model." Her mask was slipping now, the warm maternal facade cracking around the edges. "You want to blame us for your problems? Fine, but don't you dare stand in the house we built and act like you're some kind of victim." "The house you built? Mom, I paid for this house. I paid for everything in it. You built nothing except a very elaborate con game." She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "A con game? Jennifer, we're your parents. Everything we did was for your own good." "For my own good? Stealing my money was for my own good?" "We never stole anything. You gave it freely. Because you manipulated me into thinking I had to earn your love." "Love?" Her voice turned sharp. "You want to talk about love? Love is sacrifice, Jennifer. Love is putting family first. Love is understanding that some people are more important than money. You're right. Love is putting family first. So why don't you love me enough to stop bleeding me dry?" The question hung in the air between us. I could see her calculating, trying to find the right words to regain control of the situation. "We do love you," she said finally, "but love goes both ways. It requires trust and respect and unlimited access to my bank account, and understanding that family takes care of family." "Then why am I the only one doing the taking care of?" She had no answer for that. We stood in her designer kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my financial support, and she had nothing to say. "I've given you both formal notice," I said quietly. 30 days to repay what you owe me. After that, I'll be taking legal action." Her face went white. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "Jennifer, please. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Let's sit down and work this out like a family." "We're not a family, Mom. We're a business arrangement that I'm terminating. I headed for the door, then stopped. Oh, and you might want to call David. Let him know that his financial support is about to dry up, unless, of course, you think his teacher's salary is going to cover your lifestyle. The color drained completely from her face. What do you mean? I mean, I've been subsidizing David's generosity too. Those expensive gifts he gives you, the help with your bills when Dad's business is slow, it all traces back to loans I've been giving him for years. Did you really think he could afford to be your backup ATM on $40,000 a year? I left her standing in her kitchen, her wine glass forgotten, her perfect world crumbling around her. The drive back to my office was a blur of adrenaline and terror. What had I done? I'd just declared war on my own family, cut myself off from the only people who'd ever claimed to love me. But as I sat in my car in the parking garage, I realized something. For the first time in years, I felt free. The crushing weight of their expectations, their demands, their constant emotional manipulation, it was gone. My phone was already buzzing with texts and missed calls. Dad, Mom, David. I turned it off and went upstairs to my office. Sarah took one look at me and raised her eyebrows. Rough day? You could say that. I just fired my parents. Fired them? Long story. Can you get Robert Chin on the phone? I need a lawyer. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from the best contract attorney in the city, explaining 10 years of financial abuse. Robert listened without judgment, taking notes, occasionally asking for clarification. This is fairly straightforward, he said when I finished. You have documentation for everything. They're clearly liable for the amounts you've stated, and your position as guarantor makes you legally entitled to call in these debts. What about the emotional side of it? The fact that they're my parents? The law doesn't care about family relationships when it comes to financial obligations. If anything, the fact that they used family bonds to manipulate you into these arrangements makes their behavior worse, not better. That evening, I sat in my apartment, my beautiful apartment that I'd furnished with my own money, decorated with my own taste, filled with things that actually belonged to me, and tried to process what I'd done. Part of me wanted to call them, to apologize, to find some way to make this all go away. The old Jennifer was screaming in my head, desperate to restore the peace even if it meant accepting their treatment. But I thought about Dad's face when he called me nothing, about Mom's calculating silence when I asked what she loved about me, about 32 years of being the family's financial sacrifice. And I realized that what I'd lost today wasn't actually love. It was the illusion of love, the fantasy of a family that had never really existed. The next morning brought a flood of messages. David, panicked and confused. Mom, alternating between guilt trips and threats. Dad, furious and demanding I call off my lawyer. I read them all, then deleted them. Instead, I called my accountant. Margaret, I need a complete financial audit. Everything connected to my family. I want to know exactly what I'm liable for and how to protect myself going forward. Jennifer, are you sure about this? Once we start this process? I'm sure. It's time I stopped being their financial insurance policy. The audit took 3 days. The results were worse than I'd imagined. Not only had they used my credit and guarantees for their own purposes, they'd been systematically transferring their debts into my name. If their house of cards collapsed, I'd be responsible for over $1 million in obligations I'd never even seen. This is sophisticated financial abuse, Margaret said grimly. They've been building a wall of protection around themselves using your credit as the foundation. That night, I sat down and wrote out everything. Not just the financial timeline, but the emotional one. The years of manipulation, the systematic erosion of my self-worth, the way they'd weaponized my love against me. Reading it back, I felt sick. Not because of what they'd done, but because of how long I'd let them do it. My phone rang. David. Jen, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. What's getting out of hand? This whole thing with Mom and Dad. They're terrified. Mom's been crying for 3 days. Has she been crying about what she did to me or about getting caught? That's not fair, isn't it? David, did you know they call me a walking ATM behind my back? Did you know they laugh about how desperate I am for their approval? Silence. You did know. Jen, you sat there in those family meetings where they talked about managing me. You let them turn me into their personal bank account. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Tell me your version of the story where this is all okay. More silence. They're still our parents, he said finally. No, they're not. They're two people who figured out how to monetize the trauma of the children they were supposed to protect. You can't mean that. I mean every word. And David, you might want to start looking for another source of income, because whatever they've been giving you, it came from me. And that well just ran dry. I hung up on him too. The legal process moved faster than I'd expected. Robert filed the paperwork, served the notices, and began the systematic dismantling of their financial house of cards. They fought back, of course. Hired their own lawyer, threatened countersuits, tried to paint me as an ungrateful daughter having a mental breakdown. But the documentation was ironclad. 10 years of financial records don't lie. The first domino fell when their bank froze their accounts pending resolution of the guarantor dispute. Suddenly, they couldn't access the credit lines they'd been living on. The second domino was the mortgage company calling in their loan when my guarantee was removed. Without my income backing their payments, they were just an unemployed couple with a house they couldn't afford. The third domino was Dad's business line of credit getting canceled. Turns out, when you're running a consulting company that exists primarily to launder your daughter's money, removing that daughter's financial backing tends to expose the whole operation. They tried everything. Mom showed up at my office crying, begging me to reconsider. Dad called in the middle of the night, alternating between fury and pleading. David sent long emails about family loyalty and forgiveness. But I was done being their emergency fund, done being their insurance policy, done being their anything. 3 weeks after I'd walked into Dad's office with those bank statements, their perfect world was collapsing. The house went on the market. The cars were repossessed. Dad's business closed its doors. And through it all, they kept calling, kept texting, kept trying to find some way to make me responsible for fixing their mess. But I'd learned something important in those 3 weeks. Something I should have understood years ago. Their crisis wasn't my emergency. Their poor choices weren't my responsibility. Their financial collapse wasn't my problem to solve. For the first time in my adult life, I was free to be myself instead of their solution. It should have felt good. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like grief. Because when you realize your family never loved you for who you were, you don't just lose them. You lose the person you thought you were. You lose the story you told yourself about your life. But sometimes, losing the wrong story is the only way to find the right one. And I was finally ready to start writing my own story. One where I was the protagonist, not the ATM. One where love didn't come with a price tag. One where I was enough, just as I was. The final confrontation came on a Thursday morning, exactly 4 weeks after I'd served them notice. They'd requested a meeting, one last chance to work this out as a family. And against my lawyer's advice, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where they couldn't control the environment. I arrived first and chose a table in the center of the room, visible to everyone. If they were going to try their usual manipulation tactics, they'd have to do it in front of witnesses. They walked in together, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 4 weeks. Mom's designer composure was cracking around the edges. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. Then I remembered what they'd called me, and the sympathy evaporated. "Jennifer," Mom said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." "What do you want?" Dad leaned forward, trying to recapture his old authority. "We want our daughter back. Your daughter was never here, just your ATM." "That's not true." "Dad, stop. We're past the point of pretending. I know what I am to you, what I've always been to you. The question is, what do you want from this meeting?" They exchanged glances. Mom took the lead. "We want to make this right. We want to rebuild our relationship." "Our relationship was never real. It was a transaction disguised as love." "That's not fair," Dad said. "We love you. No, you don't. You love what I can do for you. There's a difference. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Real or performed, I couldn't tell anymore. How can you say that? After everything we've been through together? Everything we've been through? You mean all those years where I paid your bills while you criticized everything about me? All those family dinners where you made me feel guilty for having boundaries? All those times you made me choose between my money and your approval? We never made you choose. Every single request came with emotional blackmail attached. Every time I hesitated, you questioned my love for you. Every time I said no, I became the ungrateful daughter who forgot where she came from. Dad's face was red, because that's exactly what you became. We raised you, we sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay us? Sacrificed what? Name one thing you sacrificed for me that wasn't immediately paid back with interest. The silence stretched between us. Other coffee shop patrons were starting to notice our table, sensing the tension. We sacrificed our dreams, Mom said finally. We could have traveled more, done more with our lives, but we chose to invest in our children instead. Invest in your children? Mom, you've been living off my investments for a decade. The only thing you sacrificed was the effort of earning your own money. You're being cruel, she whispered. I'm being honest, for the first time in my life. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups jump. Enough. This has gone far enough. You've made your point, Jennifer. Now it's time to be an adult and fix this mess. Fix this mess? The mess you created by lying to me for 10 years? The mess you created by being vindictive and selfish. And there it was, the real them, underneath all the manipulation and false concern. When their tactics failed, when I refused to be managed, they showed their true faces. There we go, I said calmly. That's who you really are. That's what you really think of me. Jennifer, Mom tried to intervene. No, let him finish. Let him tell me exactly what kind of daughter I am for refusing to bankroll his lifestyle anymore. Dad's eyes were blazing. You want to know what kind of daughter you are? You're the kind who destroys her own family over money. You're the kind who turns her back on the people who love her because you're too selfish to share your success. And you're the kind of father who sees his daughter as a business opportunity. The kind who builds his entire life around exploiting someone else's need for love. We never exploited. You turned my childhood trauma into your retirement plan. You weaponized my abandonment issues to make me fund your lifestyle. If that's not exploitation, what is it? Mom was crying now, real tears this time. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration. The tears of someone whose game had been exposed. All we ever wanted was for you to be part of this family, she said through her sobs. No, all you ever wanted was for me to pay for this family. There's a difference. I stood up from the table. This meeting is over. Jennifer, wait, Dad said, his voice cracking. Please, don't do this. I turned back to look at them, really look at them. Two people who'd spent 10 years turning my love into their profit. Two people who'd called me nothing when they thought I couldn't hear. Two people who'd built their entire identity around my inability to say no. I'm not doing anything to you, I said quietly. I'm finally doing something for me. If you walk away now, Dad said, his voice hard again, don't expect to come back. Don't expect to be welcome at family gatherings. Don't expect us to be there when you need us. I almost laughed. Wow, when have you ever been there when I needed you? And what family gatherings? The ones where you passed around stories about how difficult I was being? The ones where you strategized about how to get more money out of me? You'll regret this, Mom said, her tears forgotten. You'll be alone, and you'll regret this. Maybe, but I'd rather be alone and honest than surrounded by people who see me as a paycheck. I left them sitting at that coffee shop table, two grifters who'd finally run out of marks. As I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The legal resolution took another 6 weeks. In the end, they managed to pay back about 40% of what they owed, partly from selling the house, partly from liquidating assets I'd helped them acquire. I didn't pursue the rest, not because I forgave them, but because I was done letting them take up space in my head, done letting their choices define my life. David tried to maintain contact for a while, sending awkward texts about family holidays and birthdays, but it was clear he'd chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. Eventually, even those stopped. The hardest part wasn't losing them, it was learning to live without the constant anxiety of their demands. For months, I'd wake up expecting crisis calls, expecting new financial emergencies that required my immediate attention. When they didn't come, when my phone stayed quiet and my bank account stayed stable, I realized how much of my life had been consumed by their chaos. I started therapy, real therapy, not the crisis management I'd been doing for years. Dr. Sarah Kim helped me understand the patterns, the psychological mechanisms that had kept me trapped for so long. You weren't just giving them money, she explained during one session. You were trying to purchase something that was never for sale. What do you mean? Unconditional love. You thought if you were generous enough, successful enough, useful enough, they'd finally love you the way you needed to be loved. But that kind of love can't be bought. So what do I do now? Now you learn to love yourself the way you always needed them to love you. Unconditionally. It took time. Months of unlearning old patterns, of catching myself when I started equating my worth with my usefulness. Months of building an identity that wasn't based on fixing other people's problems or funding their dreams. But slowly, something new began to emerge. A version of myself that existed independently of anyone else's approval. A woman who could say no without guilt, who could succeed without immediately looking for someone to share it with, who could be alone without feeling abandoned. 6 months after the coffee shop confrontation, I got a call from David. Jen, I need to tell you something. What? Mom and Dad, they're asking me to co-sign a loan. They want me to put my house up as collateral. I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, then forced it down. This wasn't my problem anymore. What are you going to do? I don't know. They say it's just temporary until they get back on their feet. But after everything that happened with you... David, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I learned. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. They're still our parents. They're adults who made choices, just like you have to make choices now. He was quiet for a long time. Do you ever miss it, being part of a family? I thought about it. I miss the idea of it, but I don't miss the reality of it. And I've learned something important. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Are you lonely? Sometimes, but it's clean loneliness now. It's not the sick, desperate loneliness of being used by people who claim to love you. 3 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that David had said no to the loan. Mom and Dad were furious, apparently. They'd lost their backup ATM, too. I felt sorry for David. He was going through the same painful awakening I'd experienced. But I was proud of him, too. It takes courage to break a pattern that's been your whole life. A year after the coffee shop meeting, I was in a completely different place. My business was thriving without the constant drain of family financial crises. I'd bought my own house, a beautiful place that belonged entirely to me. I'd started dating again, actually dating instead of looking for someone to help me fix my family's problems. Most importantly, I'd learned the difference between being loved and being used, between family and dysfunction, between generosity and enabling. I still got the occasional message from Mom or Dad, usually around holidays or when they needed money. I deleted them without reading them, because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of my life. You can't force people to love you the way you need to be loved, but you can stop accepting treatment that pretends to be love when it's really something else. The girl who used to write checks to buy affection was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth wasn't measured in dollars and cents, and that woman was finally, truly free. On a cold Tuesday morning in February, exactly 18 months after I'd walked out of that coffee shop, I was sitting in my office when Sarah buzzed me. "Jen, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your mother." For a moment, my breath caught. Then I felt that familiar armor slide into place, not the desperate compliance of the old days, but the calm strength of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she would and wouldn't accept. Tell her I'm not available. She says it's important. She says it's about your father. I closed my eyes, feeling the old patterns trying to reassert themselves. The automatic assumption that their crisis was my emergency. The ingrained belief that I was responsible for fixing whatever had gone wrong in their lives. Then I opened my eyes and looked around my office, at the awards on my wall, earned through my own effort, at the photos of friends who loved me for who I was, not what I could give them, at the view from my window of a city full of possibilities. Take a message, I told Sarah. If it's truly important, she can put it in writing. Because I'd learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be someone's solution. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself. And sometimes the only way to build a real family is to walk away from the fake one. I never did find out what was wrong with Dad. Whatever crisis had brought Mom to my office that day, they handled it without me. Just like I'd finally learned to handle my life without them. And we were all better for it.